Next question. Jocko, love the podcast. Part of the question.
Oh, thank you.
Right on. Any suggestions for leading command staff to understanding the ground level troops in a mission?
Okay, so for those of you that are not in the military, command staff, that's sort of, for the business world, that would be like corporate headquarters. You know, the corporate headquarters, you got the command staff, and so it happens in both situations where you end up with the command staff or the corporate headquarters that kind of loses track of what they're actually there for, the ground level mission, the troops that are on the ground. And this is a tough question, but it's also kind of a simple one. So I go back to trying to constantly remind people what the mission is. What are they trying to do? And I had the Admiral, when I was the Admiral's aide, I worked for the Admiral, great guy. And one of the things, I've probably talked about this before, but one of the best things that he did was, because he's so detached from the SEAL platoons, like there's layer upon layer upon layer in between him and them. And actually, believe it or not, the job of the Admiral that's in charge of the SEAL teams, this is going to sound strange to everybody. The job of the Admiral that's in charge of the SEAL teams is to get equipment and gear and training for the SEAL teams now and for like the next 10 years, because that's the way the budgetary process works in the Pentagon. And there's so don't think of, when you think, I know you want to think of the SEAL Admiral as the warfighter that's going forward. The guy that's actually in charge, the senior SEAL, now there you could be at a special operations group, there's other places you could be, but the guy that's in charge of the SEALs, of Naval Special Warfare Command, that's what it's called, Naval Special Warfare Command. The Admiral that's in charge of that, which puts him in charge of all the SEALs, that guy, his job is to train and equip SEALs. Train and equip. Not take them into battle, but train and equip. And so you end up with this whole organization where the purpose of the organization is to train and equip. But the organization is huge. And even that command organization gets very big. And so what they start doing is they start losing focus that 10 levels below them, out somewhere overseas, is an 8-man squad in a Zodiac off the coast of some nation doing a reconnaissance. It's very, they don't even think about it. They haven't thought about that for years. Yeah. And so they lose track. And it happens in the corporate world as well, where the head shed, they're dealing with stuff too, right? They're dealing with legal problems. They're dealing with compliance problems. They're dealing with financial problems. They lose track of the fact that there's a guy on the front line that's trying to fix a car or replace an air conditioner. You know, that's the way it is. So you lose the vision of that. You lose track of that. So what was great about this Admiral that I work for is in these big meetings where they would be talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars of expenditures over the next 12 years and various training commands and all this stuff, huge. And he would always say, how does this impact a SEAL platoon overseas? How does this help a SEAL assaulter go out and shoot a bad guy in the face? That's what he would ask. And that snaps everybody back into reality of what it connects exactly what this question is. Suggestions for leading command staff to understanding the ground level troops. You got to ask that question. In the business side, I've seen the same thing. The guys totally lose track of it. So you end up, you got to ask the question, hey, everything that you're talking about, this compliance thing and this regulatory thing and this new software that you're talking about, let me ask you a question. How is this going to help one of our frontline salespeople close a deal? That's the question. That's the whole reason that we're here. The whole reason that this big staff is here. The whole reason we have this building. The whole reason we have this base is so that a SEAL overseas can close with and destroy the enemy. Or if we're a big corporation, it's so that this repairman can make it to a house and fix an electrical problem in a short period of time, efficiently and effectively. That's what we're all here for. So I think that's what you have to do. You have to keep reminding them of what's going on down on the front lines, what the mission is, what the men are doing, what issues are out there. Another thing you could take is you want to take these people with you, or you want to get anecdotal information. I know it's cheap. It's cheap to do this. But you go out and you gather anecdotal information that you can bring back to headquarters and say, hey, you know what? I know we're all doing a good job here. Let me tell you, the troops on the ground need this cold weather gear. Right now, they don't have it. Here's a message I just got from a guy overseas. They're up in northern Iraq. We thought it was going to be warm. Guess what? It's 32 degrees. There's snow on the ground. These guys aren't prepared for it. We need to get in this gear. Okay, so you're using anecdotal information to paint the picture of what's going on the front lines. Same thing with, if you're a corporate guy and you want to make sure people stay engaged, go out on a call with that electrician that's visiting a house on a where there's been a breaker blown and the guy's working through the payment system that you devised that you thought was so smart. It doesn't get connection while you're out in the field and now he can't run a credit card.
Yeah.
You want to come back and tell the head shed that.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things. Another thing that you can do is you ask those questions all the time, and maybe you just come up with some kind of a mantra that you repeat all the time and that you sign your emails with that says, we're here to support. We're here to support the frontline guys. We're here for the front line, or ask yourself the question, does this help the front line? Every decision that we make, we got to ask ourselves, does this help our front line? Does this help our frontline personnel? And I think that's what you got to do. Now, one thing that you got to be ready for on this, you got to be ready for someone to say they don't understand the big picture. This is what you got to be ready for, because I've heard this.
Wait, who's going to say that?
The corporate.
Oh, okay.
You go to the corporate and say, look, we got the guys on the front lines. We need to get them this gear. And they go, look, they don't understand the big picture.
Right.
We can't afford that right now. Look, okay. I hear what you're saying. But be ready for it. It's an excuse. It's an excuse, and you got to be ready for it. And the way that you get ready for it, I've talked about this a million times, the way you get ready for it is you have ammunition. You have ammunition. You got to have your ducks in a row. If you're going to raise your hand and say, hey, here's what's going on the front lines, here's a problem that they have, you can't just back down when they say, hey, they don't know what's going on. They don't get it. They don't get that's a big thing they say in the military. They don't get the big picture. I would hear that threat and I'd say, you know what? Actually, we do get the big picture. We're living the big picture. You don't get the big picture. Here's the big picture. I got frontline troopers that need cold weather gear or they're going to freeze and not be able to operate.
Yeah.
The picture doesn't get any bigger than that.
Yeah.
Now, you can't, of course, come across like that. Right. And what you have to do is you have to look at it systematically and over a long term and say, this is a plan. And I've got a plan for the long term of how we're going to get these guys this cold weather gear in the future. But right now, we've got a little fix that's going to cover these guys that are in the field right now. You got to come armed with ammunition so that you can refute this common call that gets made, which is they don't understand the big picture out in the field, so don't worry about them. No, the only reason we're here is for those guys in the field. So let's remember them.
And that's pretty good.